In the heart of Rome, nestled within the ancient walls of Vatican City, lies a secret darker than the catacombs beneath its feet, a secret that has been debated, denied, and whispered about for over 80 years. What really happened behind the hallowed walls of the Vatican while the world was engulfed in the flames of World War II? The official story is one of neutrality, of quiet diplomacy and humanitarian aid. But the shadows tell a different tale, a story of controversy, moral ambiguity, and a pope caught in the most challenging predicament of the 20th century. Tonight we peel back the layers of history to uncover the Vatican's darkest secret. To understand this story, we must first meet the man at its center, Pope Pius XII. Born Eugenio Pacelli, before becoming Pope in March 1939, just 6 months before the war began, Pacelli was the Vatican's top diplomat in Germany. He knew the country, its people, and its leaders intimately. He had personally negotiated the Reichskonkordat, a controversial treaty with Hitler's regime in 1933, meant to protect the rights of the Catholic Church in Germany. Some saw this as a necessary evil, a pragmatic move to shield Catholics from persecution. Others saw it as a fatal compromise, a handshake with a devil that lent the new regime a veneer of international legitimacy. When Pacelli ascended to the papacy, the world watched, holding its breath. Would this experienced diplomat, now the leader of hundreds of millions of Catholics, stand up to the tyranny spreading across Europe? As the war machine rolled across Poland and the horrors began to unfold, a deafening silence seemed to emanate from Rome. While leaders like Churchill and Roosevelt condemned the atrocities, Pope Pius remained publicly impartial. This silence became the core of the controversy. Why didn't he speak out? Why didn't he excommunicate the Nazi leaders, many of whom were baptized Catholics? His critics then and now paint a damning picture. They argue that Pius was more concerned with protecting the Vaticanese institutional power and neutrality than with saving lives. They point to his fear of communism, suggesting he saw Germany as a necessary barrier against the Soviet Union, a lesser of two evils. To them, his silence was a form of complicity, a moral failure of catastrophic proportions. The charge is simple and devastating. The Vicar of Christ on earth stood by while millions were systematically murdered. But history is rarely so black and white. Defenders of Pius XII paint a completely different portrait. They argue that his public silence was a calculated, painful strategy. They contend that a public denunciation would have been not just useless, but actively harmful. It would have provoked savage retaliation against Catholics in occupied territories and jeopardized the secret aid networks the Vatican was already operating. According to this view, Pius chose a path of quiet, clandestine action over loud, empty gestures. He became what some have called Hitler's Pope, but for a reason his critics refused to see. He was working from within, using the Church's vast network to hide and save people. His public neutrality was a mask, a necessary deception to enable this secret war. And the evidence for this secret war is compelling. Throughout Italy, and especially in Rome, convents, monasteries, and even the papal summer residence, Castel Gandolfo, became sanctuaries. Thousands of people, many of them Jewish, were hidden from the Gestapo in these holy places, disguised as monks and nuns. The Vatican's diplomatic channels were used to issue false baptismal certificates and visas, allowing countless individuals to escape the continent. There are thousands of documented testimonies from survivors who owe their lives to the quiet intervention of priests, bishops, and Vatican officials, all acting under the Pope's authority. One of the most famous examples is the chief rabbi of Rome, Israel Zali, who, after the war, converted to Catholicism and took the name Eugenio. In honor of the Pope who had helped shelter his community, he claimed the Pope's actions saved thousands of lives in Rome alone. So we are left with two conflicting narratives. Was Pope Pius XII a silent accomplice, a Hitler's Pope who prioritized institutional power over human life? Or was he a quiet hero, a master of diplomacy who understood that a single loud protest would have condemned thousands more to death, choosing instead to wage a secret, life-saving war behind a veil of public neutrality? This is the central question, the knot at the heart of the Vatican's darkest World War II secret. The Vatican itself has been slow to release all the relevant archives. For decades, researchers were only allowed limited access. It wasn't until March 2020 that the complete archives for Pius XII's papacy were finally opened to scholars, promising new revelations. The early findings from these newly opened archives are fascinating. They reveal a man tormented by his decisions. We see internal memos, drafts of speeches never given, and frantic communications from his diplomats across Europe detailing the horrors they were witnessing. These documents show that the Pope was acutely aware of what was happening. We see his anguish, his debates with advisors about whether to speak out. They show a leader walking a tightrope, desperately trying to navigate an impossible situation where every choice had potentially catastrophic consequences. He knew that speaking out against Hitler directly could lead to the German state's severing ties with the Vatican, which would effectively end all of the Church's rescue operations within the Reich's territory. He had seen it happen in the Netherlands. After the Dutch bishops publicly condemned the persecution, the Nazis rounded up every Catholic of Jewish descent, including Edith Stein, a nun who would later be canonized as a saint. Pius feared a repeat of this on a massive continent-wide scale. So what is the ultimate verdict? The truth, as is often the case in history, is likely somewhere in the messy, uncomfortable middle. Pope Pius XII was not a simple villain, nor was he an uncomplicated saint. He was a man of his time, a cautious diplomat thrust into a global catastrophe. His primary concern was the preservation of the Church, an institution he believed was essential for the salvation of souls. He may have genuinely believed that quiet diplomacy and secret aid would save more lives than a public condemnation. Perhaps his greatest failure was not one of malice, but of imagination. He may not have fully grasped the unprecedented nature of the evil he was facing, an evil that did not play by the traditional rules of diplomacy or warfare. He was playing chess while his opponent was flipping the board and setting it on fire. The story of Pope Pius XII during World War II is not a simple tale of good versus evil. It's a complex and tragic story about power, faith, and the terrible choices that must be made when the world descends into madness. It serves as a powerful reminder that silence in the face of injustice is never neutral. It is always a choice, and it always has consequences. The debate over his legacy will continue to rage as historians sift through the millions of newly released documents. But what is clear is that the story we thought we knew is far from complete. The Vatican's darkest secret is not necessarily one of evil intent, but one of profound and heartbreaking moral ambiguity, a story that continues to haunt the conscience of the modern world. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into history compelling, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world.